I'm Bryan Gruley, the author of Bleak Harbor, and this is Author's Voice.
Hi everybody and Happy New Year. Welcome to Author's Voice, where we have a brand new season of connecting authors to the world. This is Solved, and I'm your host, Libby Hellman. Today we're going to be talking to a friend of mine and an author who's just come out with a terrific new novel. It's called Bleak Harbor. The author is Bryan Gruley. It's published by Thomas & Mercer, and it's $24.95. Welcome, Bryan.
Thanks for having me.
I love it. We are going to be, if you're watching this on Facebook Live, we are going to be taking questions. So if you have any questions for Bryan, just list them in the comments section and with your name and where you're from so we can get to know you, and we'll be over for dinner later on tonight. And most importantly, though, you can order a signed copy of Bleak Harbor right now. Go to authorsvoice.net and you can get your copy sent right out to you after this broadcast. So I think that's all the things I need to do, and now we can talk about Bleak Harbor.
Oh boy.
So where did the idea come from?
Well, unlike my previous three books, it wasn't a crystalline idea that I took based on some real world story or that I had sort of developed totally. I knew I wanted to write about a boy who had parents who have issues that are not only, they're secrets to each other, and that the boy becomes aware of them.
Why did that interest you?
It just did, I don't always know why things interest me. My first book was inspired by a daydream or a nightmare I had about pieces of a snowmobile washing up on a public access at a lake. And I just thought, okay, what's that about? It raised a question in my head. And so I was interested in Danny, who is 15 years old, about to turn 16 at the beginning of Bleak Harbor. And Danny is on the spectrum. And I've been asked a lot why I chose to do that. And I just thought, well, all characters have distinguishing characteristics, as you know, and I decided to make that his. I didn't know much about autism at that time. I wouldn't call myself an expert now. I did some reading, but I didn't set out to make Danny Peters a sort of definitive autistic character. I wanted him to be a 15-year-old boy who also happens to have some characteristics that I hope make him even more interesting. 15-year-old boys are interesting.
You must have had questions about a 15-year-old boy and autism, and where did you go to get those questions answered?
I read a number of pieces in magazines and newspapers. I read pieces of a book about autism, and what my general takeaway from those, Libby, was that there's a lot of disagreement about what autism is, about what causes it, about how to treat it, which actually gave me some freedom to create Danny as I wanted to create him. And his mother at one point in the book sort of dismisses his doctors as simply throwing labels around that they don't really understand, that Danny is his own boy, whether he has autism or Asperger's or he's on the spectrum or he's off it. He is her beautiful boy, and he is what he is, and she loves him for that.
Would you call him a savant?
He's he's a smart kid,
yeah.
But he's socially distanced, and he has some obsessions that I think fit with his personality.
the first 3 pages of the book, the prologue, swept me up like I haven't read in
great.
a book in a long time.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I just read them and I said, great opening. That was terrific.
Well, thanks.
Was that part of the initial edit, or did that come afterwards?
Well, you know, I took a long time to write this book, unfortunately. You know, it took about 4 years, which is an eternity in our genre. But, okay, be that as it may, if memory serves, I didn't have a prologue early, and I rewrote the first chapter a number of times, and then I thought, there were reasons I didn't want to start with the first chapter I started with. I wanted to have something that raises questions in the reader's mind before they meet Danny, his mother Carrie, and her husband, Danny's stepfather Pete. And so I wrote that prologue, and that was there before it was edited. And, you know, and of course, my editor, Caitlin Alexander, made some excellent suggestions. And it was easy to fool with that prologue because all it is dialogue between two people, and
you never name.
You don't know who they are, at least then.
Right.
Hopefully you can figure out who they are later, but definitely I wanted to set a hook. And so I did with you, and I'm grateful.
It was a little misdirection, too. So,
yeah, a little bit.
It was a hook. But
that's what mysteries are supposed to do.
I know.
Misdirect.
I know. I get it. You set the story at the Dragonfly Festival in Michigan. Is that real?
No, not that I know of in Michigan, but just because I thought, would anybody really do a Dragonfly Festival? I Googled Dragonfly Festival, and sure enough,
really,
there are there's festivals for everything. and all strawberry festivals, no matter where they are held in the capital of strawberry production in the world. That's what I've learned about those.
Isn't that in California someplace?
It doesn't matter where it is, they claim that. But so there are Dragonfly festivals, and Danny, of course, is enamored of dragonflies, so it was fitting.
Yeah. Well, that had a lot to do with the way you unrolled the plot. I mean, there was always an allusion to dragonflies at some point. Yeah. And it also served, I'm sure, as a metaphor for you in some sense. Can you talk about that, or maybe you didn't?
Well, I don't really seek out heavy metaphor or simile. You know, they just happen. I was just personally, I got into the idea of dragonflies when I read a New York Times story. This was 6 or 7 years ago, so I think before Bleak Harbor. But I ripped this clip out, put it in some file I have, and said someday I'm going to write about this. And dragonflies, for their, to most people, they're beautiful, but really, and they're harmless to humans. They don't bite or sting or anything. But in the animal kingdom, they are one of the most vicious and efficient killers. And that, I didn't know, that was what the Times story was about.
Interesting.
And I was like, really? I didn't know that. Yeah. Personally, I've always thought they were creepy. And when I was a boy, I imagined they must sting or bite or something, even though they didn't. And the way they flit, they flit this way and flit that way. And I didn't like it. So it was something
but
I
Danny liked it.
Danny loves dragonflies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well,
Just because.
Why do you like chocolate ice cream? That's a little less threatening than a dragonfly.
So we talked a little bit about him being autistic. And there are a lot of different manifestations of autism by different people, and so he actually seemed to me to be fairly normal. I mean, the social encounters were hard for him. And when he was young, I guess he used to have tantrums and things, but he's kind of smoothed out.
Some, yeah. But autistic people walk around, they're generally normal people, but they might have, certain quirks or or characteristics. And to me, you know, who doesn't?
Right.
And Danny refers to his parents at one point as autistics of a sort, you know, obsessed with their own meaningless little daily struggles.
So one thing I notice is everybody all the characters in the book have their own story. And usually that story is kind of sad or tragic or one that's kind of mercenary, you know, either they, and which characters did you really want the reader to focus on? I mean, I got the sense that the female police officer who's in the story,
Katja Malone.
you really liked her.
I did.
Mean, yeah. But, and the only person who didn't seem to have a story behind him except for his illness, or not illness, his circumstances was Danny.
Right.
But talk a little bit about the story itself and the motivations behind some of the characters, at least as much as you can. Which ones you really, really wanted to focus on?
Well, I think, you know, that he's not a protagonist in the classic sense, but, you know, it's about Danny. He's gone. How are we going to find him? Or are we going to find him before this kidnapper does something bad to him? So it's him, and I love Danny. I think he's beautiful, as his mother says, but he has certain issues, and some of them are shared by many 15-year-old boys. Pete, his stepfather, I really like too. He's a lovable loser, and he can't seem to get his stuff together, but he clearly loves Danny. He has a good rapport with the boy, but his life's decisions are impinging on that. His mother, Carrie, has had a rough go. She comes from a family that has, you know, wealthy, very wealthy family, descended from an extremely entrepreneurial patriarch who came to came to Michigan in the 1860s and built this regional industrial hub. But of course, as often happens with those families, the descendants,
Right.
you know, they squander it.
Right.
And this has, in effect, fallen on her shoulders. And so she struggles with that, with her own feelings of wanting to rebel against her father in particular. And she's made a couple of bad decisions that have put her in a bad spot. And so, you know, often bad decisions beget other bad decisions.
Right.
So I think, you know, those three characters are the center of the book, but then there are all these other ones who
Yeah, there are a lot of
impinge or
interesting people
Yeah.
that come up. Which besides Danny, which character did you relate to the most?
I relate to.
Or which one was the most interesting to write?
The most interesting to write, I think, besides Danny, was a character named Quartz, which is an alias, and that's what he's called throughout the book. Quartz is a former NSA spook who leaked some information to a reporter who burned him. And so he's on the run from the federal government, but he's very effective at disguising himself, and he's really good at finding things via the dark web. So rich people hire him, and in this case, he's been hired by a very wealthy logistics company CEO.
For which Carrie works.
In Chicago, for whom Carrie works,
Yeah.
yes. And so Quartz was originally supposed to be in the book for one scene. That's what I thought. When I wrote him, I thought, okay, this guy's going to be there. But then, you know, you start writing a character and you start to say, well, okay, what is he wearing? And why is he wearing that? And what is his background? And how did he get here? And then I sort of fell in love with the guy. And next thing I know, he's a major character.
Yeah.
And he sort of has an affinity with Danny at some point in the book.
Now, did you have to do research on the dark web?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, if you're a reporter like I am, you read about it all the time. Well, the dark web, hacking, all that stuff, and there's a bit of that in the book. I ran it by some people who know something about it, and basically what happens in the book is pretty rudimentary. It's not all that sophisticated, but it's cool because it messes with people.
Right, right. But let's talk about males writing females. Were you aware of doing or not doing certain things because of the gender of the character?
Well, was I aware? Well, so for instance,
How's it different? How is writing a female different than writing a male character, or at least in Bleak Harbor?
well, certainly writing a mother versus a father is
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, that came through pretty clearly.
That's certainly different. And Carrie has an unfortunate experience that if well, I guess it's a Me Too experience, although the encounter I wrote about was long before, I wrote it long before Harvey Weinstein or any of those other people were outed. But it's been happening for centuries, so
Yes.
it wasn't surprising. But I, you know, I know a lot. I know a lot of women. I've been married to one for 38 years, and I have daughters. And so I don't get in and go, okay, the woman's talking, she has to talk this way, or the man's talking, he has to talk that way. I just try to let it flow, and then hope that, you know, my editors or my readers say, hey, this is just stupid. A woman wouldn't say this, or a man wouldn't say that. So.
I did kind of notice, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, there was more internalizing by the female characters of, you know, what their thought process was than the male characters. Certainly with Carrie, and a little bit with Michelle, the newspaper person,
Right.
and a little bit with Malone too. And I'm wondering, was that something that you were doing consciously, or was that just the way you want the story was going?
You know, that's good reporting on your behalf. I didn't really realize that.
Okay.
But when you said it, I thought, yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because women are deeper than men.
So we are so fascinating.
No news there.
Yeah.
And of course, the male characters in this particular book, you know, but Pete, you know, he likes to go to the bar, and he's like a boy, you know.
Yeah.
Pressman is just, you know, he's just a jerk.
Right.
And there's a couple others, but they're not as major. There's a character in my next book, which is also set in Bleak Harbor, who's a male, and he's much more. We're going to see into this guy's head more than some of these characters.
So all the characters, including the women, have a kind of moral ambiguity to them. Even the good ones could be pretty cynical at times. And Danny is pretty much the same way. Was that why you named it Bleak Harbor? I mean, a lot of the characters, I mean, there were no real, I want to say, bouncy, cheerful people.
No.
In the story.
Katja's probably the closest to that.
Yeah.
Katja Malone, who is the police officer, and she has a terrible.
Yeah, I just wondered if
event in
it
her
was
past.
the way you normally write, or is it maybe because of the dark times that we're in?
Well, you know, I wrote this book. The first draft was done in like 2014, so I don't know if that counts as in these dark times. But
Yeah.
the Bleak Harbor, originally the title was The Last of Danny, and we changed it because we knew that, you know, Thomas and Mercer gave me a 2-book deal, and they wanted another book placed in Bleak Harbor, so they thought, let's use the place name. And how did I get it? It just popped, as with many names, it just popped into my head. And originally I spelled it with an E, B-L-E-A-K-E, because I thought, well, Bleak, it'll just be too heavy-handed. And I thought a family from New England, they could have a spelling like that. And then my friends at Thomas and Mercer said, that E is going to screw up metadata searches. And I said, okay, get rid of the E.
Okay, okay, even though their name was Bleak.
Yeah.
The family name. Bleak Harbor basically, I mean, people seem to leave Bleak Harbor in order to improve their lives. I mean,
Yeah.
Michelle was leaving, Malone
Right.
was thinking about it, Carrie I won't.
Carrie wants.
She wants to
She
leave
wants out.
through the entire.
She did.
book.
She did leave at one point.
Yeah.
But Pete comes there
Yeah.
and
yeah.
opens a marijuana shop, a legal marijuana shop that, well, it's borderline legal as it turns out.
Yeah.
Katja Malone will be in the next book as the police chief, so she stays.
Oh wow.
And of course, the Bleaks,
Yeah.
the family, Carrie's brother Jonah Bleak is the mayor, reluctantly, but he's the mayor.
Yeah.
So, and it's like many of the towns, or some of the towns along Michigan's western shore, a lot of transients, a lot of rich people who have houses or condos or whatever there from Chicago, Detroit,
Right.
mostly more Chicago than Detroit, some from Indianapolis.
Yeah. So let's talk a little more about writing in general. You've been a reporter and a journalist. That's how you started. What made you turn to fiction? Or was it something you always wanted to do?
Exactly. When I first started to write, when I was 7 or 8 years old, it was because I had read a bunch of Hardy Boys books. And I invented my own Hardy Boys, the Anderson twins, and wrote a number of stories about them, and even drew those little drawings that are in the Hardy Boys books that I liked, and read them to my classes at St. Gemma Elementary in Detroit. So I always thought I want to write novels and fiction, but I got out of college and I realized to eat.
You had to write, yeah.
Yeah, I had to do something real, and I wanted to write. Plus, I'm 21 or 22 years old. What do I have to say? Nothing,
You
At
were
least
aware
me.
of that. Yeah.
Oh, you sit down to writing, you're writing stupid stuff, and I have some of that still in my files. But still, over the years, the desire to write novels, I wouldn't say it consumed me, but it was always there. And I remember telling my friend, terrific, probably the best writer I've ever known personally, Brian Doyle. He passed away last year, and he appears in the book near the end. Doyle would say, you just want to have a book signing and have everybody there to sign your books. And he was yanking my chain, but later when I started writing novels, he was a big supporter of mine. And so I went through this sort of detour into nonfiction, which I found I really loved. And, small paper, bigger paper, big paper, Wall Street Journal, and now Business Week magazine. And all of that has contributed and helped me learn how to tell stories, how to
Tell me
observe details.
How that's helped you. Because I look at nonfiction and fiction as totally different. And it took me, even though I wasn't a journalist, so I was a PR person, so I was writing speeches and video scripts and articles and things like that. But I had to go back to school and learn how to master the craft of fiction.
Well,
how did journalism help you?
set aside like straight news stories.
Yeah.
General Motors yesterday said this.
Right.
Forget that. But narratives, and I've written many, many narratives, ranging from 800 words to 5,000-6,000 words, and it's you want to keep the reader in the room, get them there, hook them, and then keep them there. So if you're good at that, then you've been really good about observing detail, seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing. You've been good about telling the reader only what he or she needs to know at any particular time and getting rid of stuff that's extraneous. And you're in a very small space where you may have, you've got 500 pounds of potatoes and you only have an 8-pound bag to put them in. So you learn economy. And I'd say the challenge of the shift to fiction is voice. You're, as a journalist, and we'll, for the moment, set aside the debates engendered by the president, you're supposed to have distance. And you might have a, there might be point of view in a story. If you're writing a profile of a given individual, you're going to hear their voice. But that voice and the voice that's in a book of fiction, that's the toughest transition. And I took a couple cracks, big chunks of novels, and I was still doing that arm's length thing.
Yeah.
I think what helped me was writing in first person, my first 3 novels, in the person of Gus Carpenter. And that helped a great deal. And then after those books, I could have done some more, but I didn't really want to. And other editors were saying, you need to get out of your comfort zone. And I definitely did that with Bleak Harbor.
Yes, you did. So you've kind of had a roller coaster career, as many of us have in this field. Tell us about the first 3 novels, and then the hiatus, and now you're back. And now you're back.
And now I'm back. Well, I wrote Starvation Lake, and it was submitted in the course of a year and was rejected 26 times. And I had given up on it. I thought, okay, I'll just write another one. And then Trish Grader at Touchstone, Simon & Schuster, gave me a 3-book deal.
Wow.
So I'm like, wow, that's so cool, except now you have to write those other 2 books. And actually the second one I wrote was so bad I just threw it away. So I actually wrote 4 Starvation Lake books, but nobody's ever going to see the second one. So then, Starvation Lake sold very well, got great reviews, was nominated for an Edgar, didn't win, won some other prizes. Same with Hanging Tree, did very well. And Skeleton Box, the 3rd one, I thought was probably my best, and it just tanked. And there are a number of reasons. Well, one of the reasons was they put it out in hardcover. My previous were trade paper.
Yeah.
I don't think that was a good decision.
Yeah.
It also came out on the same day as a book called Gone Girl.
Ah.
That's kind of a problem.
Kind of.
That's why Gillian gave me this blurb, because she owed me after sucking all the air out of the room back in 2012.
I thought that somebody said here actually that this could have been a Gone Girl, but about a boy, because it was so the plotting was so meticulous.
Yeah, in fact, I have yet to read. I've seen a movie. I haven't read Gone Girl because I knew it was about a family and a kidnapping, and I thought there might be too much overlap. I don't want to know how Gillian did this. And in addition, she turns phrases that if I tried, I would separate a shoulder.
Yeah.
So
right.
I try not to do that. But anyway, so then I had an offer to write 2 more Starvation Lake books, and I wasn't really feeling it, and Skeleton Box wasn't doing well, and I went off, and then it took me too long, and I think part of it was I didn't have a deadline. And I tell young reporters this all the time, deadlines are your friend, because you have to get done. You'll live to fight another day, and then you can fix it. Sometimes with journalism, you turn it in and you fix it as best you can, and you'll make sure you get the facts right, and then it goes out there, and then you can write another story tomorrow or next week. With fiction, you have a little more leeway because the deadlines aren't quite as stringent and difficult. But I've now written a follow-up to Bleak Harbor called Purgatory Bay, and another happy title. And it took me less than a year. I'm almost done. Yeah, and
Kent Kruger wrote a book called Purgatory Ridge.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Anyway, what do you think your strength is as a writer? If you had to isolate it down to 1 or 2 things.
Let's see. I think I'm good at creating human, flawed characters. Maybe too many. And I think I'm good at detail, at seeing and evoking scenes and putting you there.
What do you think?
I'm told I'm really good at dialogue, but
Yeah, you
I
are.
don't know.
You are good at dialogue. What do you think is your weakness, or what is something that you would like to be better at?
You know, maybe have some real romance in one of these books. There was
Really?
sort of one in Starvation Lake, you know, but I think I'm thinking with the commercial side of my head.
Yeah. Yeah, no, as a writer, at craft.
As a writer, you know, I always think, why can't I just write a nice, simple book? And I can't. All 4 books have all these twists and complicated turns, and I start out thinking it's going to be simple, and then it's not.
It gets complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you did a great job with Bleak Harbor.
Thank you.
So we are coming to the end of our talk today, and if any of you are watching Facebook Live or the recording thereof, which will be coming up later, don't forget to order a signed book of Bleak Harbor, and we will make sure we get it out to you right away. As we said before, it's published by Thomas & Mercer, and it's $24.95. Coming up on Author's Voice, we have a brand new season, and I just want to tell you a couple of the shows that are coming. We have Lit with Love with Sonali Dev. She's going to return with Tracy Brogan to discuss My Kind of Forever. That's on Thursday, January 24th at 2 p.m. House Divided will be hosted by Bjorn Skaptison, and he's going to be talking to David Blight about Frederick Douglass. You know, never mind, I won't say that. You all know what I'm thinking. Prophet of Freedom, January 25th, 3 p.m. And I will be back again next month, and I will be interviewing Sarah Paretsky. So make sure you tune in again. We loved having you, and thank you again to Bryan for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll be back soon.